Stories about America to read aloud. Number 3, Old Ironsides. Danny Mouse and his sister May lived on a ship near Boston Bay. The ship was named the Constitution, but everyone called it Old Ironsides. It was the most famous warship in all the history of the American Navy. You would think any mouse would be proud to live on such a great ship, and Danny was, but not May. "I don't know how I ever got on this boat in the first place," said May. "I was too little then to remember, but it's the strangest boat I ever saw, and I want to get off. Get off." It was a strange boat, all right. For winter, summer, spring, or fall, it never sailed to sea at all. Instead, it just lay there in the water by the Navy dock, and people came to visit it almost every day. All sorts of people, young men in college sweaters, old ladies with umbrellas and knitting bags, even babies asleep in their mother's arms. They would climb the gangplank. They would stroll around the decks. They would look at the 44 big guns. Many school children came, and they would listen while their teachers told about the great sea battles the ship had fought. The teachers said that Old Ironsides was more than 160 years old, far too old to fight any more. So now it was kept afloat as a memorial of our country's past. "Why do they call it Old Ironsides?" May asked Danny one day. The two mice were hiding behind a coil of rope, watching some more visitors tour the ship. "I don't see any iron," she said. "Old Ironsides may be brave and good, but you can see it's made of wood." She was right. Old Ironsides didn't have a single iron side. It was made of wood, well-seasoned live oak, red cedar, hard pine. Danny sighed. "If you'd listen to what the teachers say, you'd understand these things," he told his sister. "This is a wooden ship, but long ago in a fierce battle, when the enemy's shot was bouncing off the sides of the ship without doing any damage, one of the sailors shouted, 'Huzzah! Her sides are made of iron.' He meant that this was a tough, strong ship. After that, everybody called it Old Ironsides." "All right," said May, "but I still want to get off." You really could not blame her. When she snuggled down in her nest below deck, there were so many feet tramping overhead that she couldn't sleep, and she was almost always hungry, because there wasn't much food on Old Ironsides. Just popcorn and bits of broken cookies that children sometimes spilled from bags and packages. Danny shook his head. He had already tried to get May off. He had already run this way and that way to every side of the big boat, yet no matter where he peeked over the deck, there was nothing but water, and May couldn't swim. The only other way off was the gangplank, but May said too many people walked along there. She was afraid she would be stepped on. Now, hiding behind the coil of rope, May whispered to Danny, "I don't see many children here today. That means there won't be much for us to eat." Her furry little face puckered into a frown. "If it weren't for the school children, there wouldn't even be popcorn on this ship," she said. "If it weren't for school children, there wouldn't even be a ship," said Danny. "A long time ago, when Old Ironsides was wearing out and people thought it wasn't of any more use, they were going to break up the boat and get rid of it. Why didn't they?" "If only you'd listen, May," Danny complained. "The teachers say that a famous poet named Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote a poem about this ship and made people remember how bravely it had fought for our country. Then the school children saved their money and gave it to pay for repairing the ship and putting it here for everybody to see." "All their money?" May wanted to know. Danny nodded. "Every penny and nickel. They didn't buy candy. They didn't buy gum. Why, they didn't even buy cheese. Not a crumb." "Not even cheese?" May's round eyes blinked in wonder. "Oh, I'd buy cheese, because I just love—" Suddenly she stopped, and tears ran down her furry nose. "Oh, dear," said poor May, "we never have any cheese on this boat. I'm so hungry." "I'll try to find something to eat," Danny promised. Away he scampered and hunted for food all over the ship, in the cook's galley and the forecastle, and even in the captain's quarters. He almost got stepped on by all the people. Sadly then, he crept back to tell May the bad news. There's not a thing on this ship to eat. There's nothing at all on this ship but feet. That settles it, wailed May. This is a wonderful boat, and I wish every child in the land could see it, but it's no proper home for a mouse like me who wants only peace and quiet and something to eat. Danny, sobbed May, I want to get off, and right now. Danny couldn't bear to see his little sister cry. Come with me, he said forcefully. I don't know how I'll do it, but I'm going to get you off. He raced away with May behind him. Suddenly he saw an old lady lay her knitting bag down on the deck. Red yarn and knitting needles were sticking out the top of the bag, for it was not closed. Follow me, whispered Danny. Straight into the knitting bag he ran, and May scampered in after him. Luckily, nobody saw them. It was dark inside the bag and hot, and the two trembling mice got tangled up in the yarn with which the old lady was knitting a red scarf for her grandson. But they crouched down as quiet as ever two mice could be, and after a while the old lady picked up her bag, closed it, and walked down the gangplank and off the ship. She didn't know she was carrying two mice along with her. It was so hot inside the bag that May began to squirm. Shush, whispered Danny. Don't move. His warning came too late. The old lady had already noticed something peculiar about her bag, so she opened it to look. Out sprang the two mice, down to the ground, and away they ran. The old lady screamed. All the people on the dock stared in astonishment. Then everyone began to laugh, for somehow May had gotten the red yarn twisted around one leg, and as she ran she pulled the yarn behind her, unraveling the scarf and stretching a long red string over the ground. Poor May was tied to the knitting bag. Quick, shouted Danny, get behind that barrel. I'll chew that string off your leg. That is just what they did. May jumped behind a barrel that was nearby, and Danny's sharp little teeth gnawed quickly through the yarn. It was done in a minute, and there was nothing left tied to May's leg except a small bit of red knitting yarn, trailing about an inch behind her as she ran. And my, how those mice did run! Where to? No one has found out. Maybe you will. Maybe someday in your house you will see a tiny gray mouse scampering around with a bit of red yarn tied to its leg. But if you do, don't laugh, don't scoff. It will be little May. She did get off.